What's up, guys? Arash Ramar here, back at it with back day. So I like to start my back day with pull-ups. I actually like to do pull-ups several times a week. Sometimes when I start my upper body training, chest, shoulders, arms, whatever it may be, I'll start with a couple sets of pull-ups. I do believe in training a muscle frequently for faster growth throughout the year, but not annihilating it. I don't believe you can have full annihilation workouts three, 4 times a week and be able to grow. That being said, you look at gymnasts, they have some of the most aesthetically pleasing bodies and they train every muscle every day, but they're not annihilating them. So I start with assisted pull-ups. I can do pull-ups normally on a regular bar, non-weighted, non-assisted, but what this does, besides the fact of taking a little tension off my shoulder, my left shoulder, which I used to have an injury, I just don't want to cause it to hurt again in the future. What it does is also lets me pull more with my lats. It lets me focus more pulling with my lats, leading with my elbows. We use a lot of delts, we use a lot of arms when doing pull-ups, and you see a lot of people yanking. Not only is the yanking bad for the bicep, bad for the shoulder, but you're not necessarily just using the back. So if you haven't tried it, try out the assisted pull-ups. I might start out with 50 or 40 pounds, but on my last few sets, it's set on 10 or 20 pounds, which is almost nothing. A lot of times when I initiate the pull, my body will actually leave the pad, and the pad will have to catch up to me because it's so light. So I do like to start with these, get the blood flow in the muscle. One thing you guys gotta understand is your body doesn't know that you're bodybuilding. Your body does not know that it's back day or leg day. It just goes in the gym and lifts the weight off of you. So it's gonna use a lot of muscles. So walking into the gym cold, no warm up, not only is it dangerous for injury, but you're not sending a neurological signal or any blood to the muscle. So your body doesn't necessarily know you're training that muscle, and by the time you're halfway through your workout, you might be getting a pump and getting stimulus in that muscle, that working muscle. So I think it's very important in the beginning of any workout to always send blood and a neurological signal, stimulus to the muscle, to put the main focus on the muscle at hand. And these assisted pull-ups really helps me do that. I get a real crazy pump, kind of get that, what do they call it? The big lat syndrome, where you see guys walking around with their hands flared out. I feel like that. Hopefully I don't look like that, but I feel like that. My lats swell up, especially right under my armpits and my delts. So I like to start off with these, and also getting the blood flow. You see me dressed with layers and layers. It's winter here and the gym is pretty cold, so I like to break a sweat and literally warm up when I'm warming up. One of my favorite exercises is bent over rows. That's where I do here second. It's a really, really tough exercise, and an exercise a lot of people avoid. And one of the reasons it's so hard is because you are bending over and holding whatever load you're using with your hamstrings and your lower back, and then you're pulling using your arms and your back, of course. One of the main things to focus here is not to bounce, not to have rhythm, and to bend over a good amount. Parallel to the ground is really, really tough. I'm nowhere near parallel to the ground here because I'll be going a little bit heavy today, as heavy as I can go. I actually feel like I'm bent over more than I actually am. Here, once you get forward to the heavier sets, you'll see what I mean. And what I mean by that is the way you feel and the contraction you get in the muscle is more important than the way you look. So sometimes you'll see somebody and you'll be thinking, oh, well, what are they doing? Their form is off, or they're not getting full range, or they shouldn't be doing this or that. But if they're getting full contraction in the muscle and they're stimulating their muscle, then they're good. So I started the bent over rows with an underhand grip. I'll switch it up from week to week. I think it's good to do both. Underhand hits a little bit more of the lower lats. But regardless if you're doing underhand or overhand, you want to pay attention to where you're pulling the bar to. If you pull the bar too high, too much higher, that doesn't make no sense. If you pull the bar too high, you're going to be focusing a lot of traps, a lot of rear delts. So you want to pull the bar roughly to your belly button or a little bit below. The most important thing with the bent over rows is not standing straight up, not using too much your traps and arms. That's what you see a lot of guys doing. One of the best pieces of advice I could give anybody that's bodybuilding is look at an anatomy chart and try to figure out, or even Google, what certain muscles are for. I know it sounds silly, but what the bicep muscle does for us, what the lat does. And, you know, just pulling a weight forward like a one-arm row or a seated row isn't necessarily 100% of the lat's function. The lat's function is to pull back and even wrap around a little bit around the spine. So one thing I really try to do that you will not see in any of the movements, or you will not see in videos, but I know I'm doing it because I can feel it, is when I pull back on a one-arm row, for instance, a seated row, or even a pull down, I pull all the way back and then I try to, almost as if I'm wrapping around my spine, like sandwiching my spine with my lats. This is something you can especially do on one-arm rows, any one-arm movement, or any one-arm cable pull. And that's really the job of the lat. It's not just to pull straight back. When you're pulling just straight back, a lot of people will be using too much of their rear delts, their biceps, and even sometimes traps if you're pulling up. So make sure on this movement you're not using too much of your traps and too much of the other muscles that come into play with this movement. As you can see on the 315, or a little bit more because we said those plates are more than 2 pounds heavier, right? So on the last working sets on the heavy weight, I'm not parallel to the ground. I'm not even close to that. I'm standing up more than I'd recommend at times. But so as I move on to my heavier sets, 2 1/4 and then 3 plates, I'm doing my best to feel my lower lats, to pull below my belly button and get a good contraction. Now, when I watched the video, I'm more upright than I thought, meaning that the feeling was good. I felt like I was bent over a good amount, so I'm using my lats, not standing up so much, using my traps. I don't really feel much in my traps or my arms. I lead with my elbows. I keep my elbows tight to my lats. Always on any back movement, guys, I do my best to retract my shoulders first. So it's a 1-2 movement. You always want to roll the shoulders back and then pull with the arms. If not, your lats are not going to always be initiating the movement. But when the delts are rolled back, you have a better chance of initiating the movement with your lats, stimulating your lats, and letting your lats do the work. Again, I sound like a broken record, but we use so many muscles when we're training. We use so many different muscles to pull a weight. We're not necessarily only using our back or only using our chest on chest exercises. We want to do our best to isolate, but it's virtually impossible to fully isolate a muscle, meaning shut every other muscle off and just focus on the one muscle at hand. That would be amazing, but it's not possible. It's not the way the human body works. If you bend over to tie your shoelace, 10, 15, 20 muscles will fire from your toes all the way up to your neck. So we want to do our best with angles, form, grip, lack of momentum, and focusing on contraction to really work the muscle at hand. So as long as you guys feel like you're getting a good contraction and you're not just weightlifting, I've said this many times before, bodybuilding is different than weightlifting. Weightlifting is moving a point from A to B, not really caring so much what muscles you're using or how your form is, just getting that weight up. Bodybuilding is lifting weights in a manner to build actual muscle development, to put the focus on an actual muscle. So I think all of us, if we threw caution to the wind with form, maybe momentum, and sacrifice negatives and contraction, we can all be about 10 to 20% stronger. So that being said, park the ego to the side and ask yourself, would I be doing this weight with this form if nobody was watching, or if my training partner or my boy was not filming me for Instagram? So keep that in mind, guys. After the bent over rows, I move on to one-arm rows. I love one-arm rows, but it's another exercise that you can definitely not get good use out of. I see a lot of people doing them wrong. I see a lot of people trying to do some fancy stuff like pulling, swinging outward, or swinging the weight away from them, and just focus on basic movements, guys. If you're going heavy, I would lead with the foot of the working hand. So here, if I'm pulling with my left arm, my left foot will be the foot that is holding most of my weight. Why? Because if I put my weight on my right foot and my left foot is back and I'm pulling with my left arm, it's gonna put a lot of stress on my lower back and my core. It's gonna be overworking, trying to keep myself straight, and I can end up pulling an erector or pulling something in my back. You wanna get a good foundation. Anytime you're lifting, it can even be curls and biceps, you wanna get a good footing and a strong foundation from the ground, and that's where you pull power from, guys. So on the one arm rows, here I'm working my way up. I usually start with a fairly light weight just to get the movement going, and then I'll try to jump up and go heavy like I do on most of my exercises. I worked up to 150s, and then I believe today I went up to 200s, which were those ratchet metal old rusty weights that have a lot of dust on them and not too many people use for obvious reasons. Again, control. I do my best to keep my elbow close to my lat, pull the shoulder back. I'm not swinging, I'm not jerking, especially on the way down. If I let that weight plummet on the way down on every rep and then I catch it and yank back up, that's a easy recipe for pulling something anywhere from your shoulder to your bicep. So control the whole movement. I don't care how heavy you're going, you gotta have control. If you can't control a weight, if you can't lower it with good control, then it's too heavy for you. Even with the 200s, I believe I kept my form very strict, very stiff, tight core, good breathing, and I pull it all the way up as high as I can go using my lat. And you guys, again, you can't see it in the video, but I do my best to, when I pull up and get a full contraction, I give it a little bit of a twist, almost pulling my elbow a little bit into my lat, as if I'm trying to flap my lat over my spine, if that makes sense. And again, that's because that is the job of the lat. The lat doesn't just pull straight forward, it will pull and back and around. So I want to focus on that in any back movement that I do to utilize the muscle in its natural range. And again, to mention gymnasts, that's why I think gymnasts have such amazing physiques, because all the movements they're doing utilize all the muscles. So they don't sit there and just do a bicep or just do a side delt exercise. They're doing a lot of pull-ups, they're doing a lot of dips, they're doing a lot of multi-jointed movements, and most of their movements are utilizing all the muscles, so they tie in together very beautifully. So on a side note, yes, I think doing dips and doing pull-ups and movements like that is very crucial to bodybuilding, but obviously you can only go so heavy, so intense with them. You can do them weighted, but a lot of us outgrow just doing body weight stuff. So it's good to incorporate them in intensity techniques, maybe when you're fatigued, or start off with them for warm-ups. Dips I stayed away from for a long time because of my shoulder. Nowadays I'm throwing them back in, and it feels good, and I enjoy doing them. I think they're a great exercise. After the one-arm rows, I moved on to a seated row. I used the mag grip, underhand mag grip. Again, just a different variation. And with seated rows, the most important thing, I believe, is to not use momentum. If you want to pull forward, if you want to stretch forward, I should say, get a nice stretch, no problem. But do not use the momentum to yank the weight back, and lead again with your delt. So I'll do my best to initiate the movement with my shoulders. So my shoulders will start the first ½ inch to 1 inch of the movement, and then I'll be pulling the rest using my lats. And again, I pull this to my belly button and get a nice contraction in the lats, try to sandwich the lats together around my spine, and get a nice stretch on the way down. Control the weight both ways, guys. Don't yank, don't swing back. At the full contraction, you can be a little bit past 90, but don't be leaning all the way back. That's not using your lats. You're gonna be just basically doing a hyperextension. I see a lot of guys literally doing a hyperextension and just happen to move their arms throughout the movement, so it looks like they're doing a row. But if I'm yanking the weight back using my lower back and my hamstrings, and then I just follow that momentum through with my arms, my back's not going to get a lot of the work. I think the reason a lot of people have a hard time developing their backs is because they're using way too much traps, delts, rear delts, and biceps. The same reason why a lot of guys have a hard time developing their chest, primarily upper chest, because too much of their front delts are coming into play. So keep that in mind, guys. Don't ego lift, don't weight lift. If you're really trying to build a streamlined physique, a physique that flows, and we're not talking about that Frankenstein look of just taking up space and being a meathead. We're talking about the art of bodybuilding. You gotta think. You gotta think and then think some more and then overthink. You have to think about every movement. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing deadlifts, seated rows, and not pull downs? Is it because that's what I need to grow my specific physique and my weak points? Or is it because that's what everyone else does and what I see in the magazines? So moving on, guys, I grabbed another mag grip. I like these grips. They have a very natural grip to them. And I think the smallest changes in angles and in grip makes a huge difference in exercises. So it's always good to have different variations and switch it up. Anytime I do a pull down, whether it be a close grip pull down or lat pull down, of course, when going heavy, you're going to lean back a little bit, but really you don't want to lean back too much. I see guys leaning back so much, they're almost parallel to the ground, and it's no longer a pull down, it's more like a row. So I try to really incorporate my lats, my lower lats, and pulling with the close grip down to my chest. And sometimes if I go lighter, I'll even pull past my chest. Now, you want to keep the tension in the lats. You don't want the lat to completely relax and let go of the load when you're stretching at the top. So you see that I stretch, I lean forward, but the tension is still in the lat. So once I initiate the movement, the lat is the first muscle to be pulling backward. You have to understand, guys, when you initiate a movement using a different muscle than the muscle you're training, it's going to make it easier for that other muscle. For instance, on standing dumbbell curls for biceps, if I pull my elbows forward, use momentum, and engage my front delt and get the weight moving, once it's moving, my biceps are just going to do a little bit of the rest of the work to get the weight up. So you want to initiate the movement the best you can with the muscle at hand. From there, I moved on to laying down on an incline bench and doing reverse flies for rear delts. Now, this is not a heavy movement. I'll go as heavy as 40s, if that, on certain days. You want to be very controlled. You don't want to swing. The rear delt is a small muscle. I also supersetted that with behind the neck pull downs. Now, I'm using another mag grip and I'm on the ground here for reasons of control and angle. It lets me lean forward a little bit more, and there's no movement, there's no sway in my upper body, so I get some good contraction. Now, the myth about behind the neck presses and behind the neck pull downs being bad for your shoulders is true and untrue. If you have little mobility, meaning if your shoulders are very tight and you have impingement, I do not recommend doing behind the neck press for shoulders or pull down for back. If you have any pain doing those exercises or any other exercises, I don't recommend you do them as well. But if you have good mobility, good range of motion, and you don't have any pain or impingement, they're not necessarily bad. Anything you do smart and not overdo it, not go too heavy, not go too crazy with sloppy form, you can be safe. Any exercise can give you an injury. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, bodybuilding is we're going into a structure, we're going to a building and lifting weights in awkward movements. I mean, if you think of it that way, it's a pretty dangerous sport. But the human body can be frail, guys. Keep that in mind. I mean, secretaries have arthritis, and even golf players, probably one of the softest sports out there, no contact, no heavy movements, they have injuries as well. So if you're bodybuilding and you're working on strength and size and you think you're never going to get injured, you're being a little bit ignorant. I'm not saying plan on getting injured, but I am saying understand that it's a possibility and act accordingly. Train smarter and maybe do some rehabilitation exercises prior to getting injured. So rehab is rehabilitating an injury, but if you do it prior to getting injured, it's injury prevention. Now, a little about the rear delt flies. You'll see a lot of people doing these with bent arms, and I did that for many years too, and sometimes I'll do different variations of them. But when I'm doing the rear delts here, what are the muscles that are going to take up the movement, like I always say. Think about the other muscles that'll do the work. It's going to be the traps and the triceps. Now, how do you weaken a muscle? If I want to get the traps and the triceps out of the movement, I need to weaken them. A muscle is the weakest at its longest point, when it's stretched out. So if you stretch out a muscle, it's going to be weak. It's at its strongest point when it's contracted. So that's why I'm keeping my arms extended out to lengthen my trap and as locked out as I can. They're not perfectly straight, especially when I go heavier, but they're locked out. So I'm fully flexing the tricep so the tricep doesn't fire, and I'm fully extending as much as I can the trap so it's not taking up the movement. Once I did this for the first time, it was night and day. It was a huge difference. I wasn't able to go as heavy, and it was a lot more stress and quicker fatigue in my rear delts. So that's something to try. For rear delts, I love the dumbbells, the reverse fly dumbbells like you see me doing here, either on a bench, which doesn't allow any swaying or any momentum, or bent over, staying very strict. I like reverse pec deck flies if done correctly and if done strict. Again, the trap is a big muscle, the triceps is a big strong muscle, the rear delt is really small, so you don't want to be swinging and using other muscles and not getting the contraction on the rear delts. Another favorite exercise of mine right here that I'm about to do, the rope pull down. I guess you could call them face pulls. I've never seen anyone do them this way. I really don't know why everyone likes to do them standing. When you're doing a face pull standing, you're focusing so much on keeping your core stiff and not letting the weight pull you forward, especially, and it doesn't allow you to go heavy. So you're not really able to go heavy and to focus on the rear delts, in my opinion. It looks a little bit awkward. I always see people kind of, if they try to go heavy, they're being pulled forward, and then they're focusing more on their feet and their core. So here I'm locked in. I'm pretty much parallel to the ground. I come up a little bit, but at the full contraction, I'm parallel to the ground, which would be similar to a standing face pull. But it allows me to do 100, 120, 130 pounds, whereas if I was standing, I wouldn't be able to do that. Why am I able to do it here? Because I'm locked in with my legs, obviously, with the lat pull down. And I'm pulling above my shoulders towards my ears and just focusing on the rear delt. I love this exercise. I've been doing it for years, and I've had a lot of people come up to me and ask me about it, and they tried it and they also loved it. So give it a try. Stay strict, get a nice stretch, and if you do come back the way I am, controlled, and then pull with your arms. So you don't want to have a big sway and a yank. Never yank the weight, guys. When you're yanking the weight and you're bouncing and you're swinging, you're not putting the load on the muscle, and you're also going to get injured. The load has got to go somewhere. So I see a lot of people at the top of movements, at the top of curls, bicep curls, at the top of lateral raises. They give a little bounce. They give a little dance at the top, and it's absolutely pointless. That little bounce, that little hop at the top of the movement is taking the load completely off the muscle. Even if it's for a fraction of a second, the weight is suspended in midair, and then it comes back down onto whatever muscle that you're working. So, it could cause an injury, it could cause an impingement, but most importantly, it's not putting the load on the muscle. If you go slow, and when you get at the top of the contraction, you keep the weight on the muscle and you get a squeeze, you're going to be doing more damage, and then controlling, as we all know, on the negative does even more damage. So here I'm moving on to some cable extensions for the shoulders. Now this is usually looked at as a rehab exercise, and it's usually done with light weight, and it's usually done with the elbow stuck to the body. So technically I'm doing everything wrong here, but I am doing these for building, strengthening, and thickening my rotator cuff from the rear. Contrary to what a lot of people know about the rotator cuff, it is a muscle. And when you hit a back double bicep, a lot of the detail that you see around someone's shoulder blade is the rotator cuff muscles. So this exercise will build it very much. Just make sure you are controlled and you don't have any pain. If you guys ever feel any pain on any exercise you're doing, do not do it. Reevaluate, figure out why, fix it, come back later. Hope you guys enjoyed. Till next time.